Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome. My name is Jordan, and I am the manager of online education programs at COSI. I'd like to thank everyone for joining me today for the COSI Science Festival. The festival has moved from a 4-day physical event to an all-digital event. We are excited to have you here with us today. On May 6th, instead of coming together for the big science celebration, we hope that you will connect virtually at home with different science activities and share your photos and videos with us on social media using hashtag COSI SciFest. So make a volcano, show us your COSI slime. We'd love to see the experiments that you are doing there at your homes and share those with us on your social media using COSI SciFest. And of course, we want to give a big shout out to all of our sponsors and partners of the COSI Science Festival, including our visionary sponsor, Battelle. We could not have done this without them. Thank you all very much. Now, it is my great pleasure to introduce you to our program today, What's in Our Water? And our presenters today are Amy Tressler and Linda Pettit. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you so much. Hi, everybody.
Hi, everyone. We appreciate you coming, or joining, I guess I should say. So Amy and I work for the Franklin Soil and Water Conservation District. We are environmental educators there. And this is one of the programs that we offer for school presentations or scout groups and things like that. It's talking about a watershed. So a watershed, we're using a model. All of our programs, by the way, we try to be hands-on or interactive. We try to get people involved because I'm a very visual learner and I know some of you are as well. Through the Soil and Water District, our focuses are on water quality and soil quality, and especially human impact on the environment, how we affect our resources around us. So by using the ENVIROSCAPE model, we are going to look at our watershed, our land area that drains to a certain body of water. And we are going to look at how the things we do to the land can affect the quality of the water around us. So looking at a watershed, like I said, is all the land that drains to a body of water, such as a stream, a river, a lake, or a pond. I recently saw a video where someone was talking about explaining a watershed, and I loved their explanation. They said, think about an umbrella upside down. So if it rains on the inside of an umbrella, all the water goes down to the bottom and catches in the middle. So that's the same thing that happens with a watershed. All of the land area drains to the body of water. It's always the lowest point. So as that water rolls downhill, when it runs off the land, we magically call it runoff. I love it when science words make sense. So that runoff goes into a creek, river, lake, or pond. You'll notice here we have 10 watersheds in Franklin County. We have a lot of rivers and tributaries. So we are going to be using the model to take a look at the different land uses that we have. And you can see here by looking at it that there are a lot of different land uses. They are very similar to land uses that we have in our own county and our own areas. So if we take a closer look, if we take a closer look, you'll notice some of the different things that we do have going on. Back to the watershed issue. So watersheds, again, small ones flow into big ones, which flow into larger ones, and so forth. Jordan, did you have a question here that we could pose? The first question?
Yes, that should have popped out there now.
Oh, we just got it. Thank you so much. So we want to know what watershed you think COSI is in. Where does COSI fall? Where does the water go that drains from COSI, from the parking lot, from the areas around it? So if you would please answer, that'd be great.
Just give a few more seconds to see if we can get the majority of our guests to get their votes in. There's a few more out there who haven't voted yet, so I'll give them just another second here.
All right.
All right, that looks like most of them. I'll go ahead and close the poll now.
Oh, look at that. Excellent. Good diversity. And I do like the top answer there. That's awesome. So the majority were absolutely correct. We are, it is in the Scioto River watershed, and right outside COSI, you can actually see the Scioto River as it flows by. The Scioto River is a relatively large river, very large river that goes as far as Columbus is considered, and it flows down through Columbus. It will go from that area down to the Ohio River. The Ohio River will then flow into the Mississippi River, and it ends out in the Gulf of Mexico, which means eventually you could, if you drop something in the parking lot at COSI, which I know you would never do because of course that's littering and we don't want to do that, but if you dropped something outside and it blew into the Scioto River, it could end up in the Gulf of Mexico. So that's kind of how watersheds flow. Everything goes downstream. We always say we all live downstream, and so you know, that's something to think about. So here you can see from the maps a little bit of how that all works out, and you can see, you know, where we are and how it goes down to the Gulf of Mexico. The state is basically kind of broken in 1/3, 2/3. The northern part of the state flows to Lake Erie. The southern part goes down to the Ohio River. And watersheds can look very different. Some are, you know, very pristine. Some are very urban. It just depends on, obviously, on where you are. We all live in a watershed. Rain, as we know in Ohio, flows a lot, runs across the land and goes to these different bodies of water. So in some places it's very natural. Some places it's very urban. In all of those places, there are some things that can run across the land with the runoff and end up into our creeks and rivers, which we're going to explore as we do the ENVIROSCAPE model.
Yes, so hi everybody. Just as Linda was saying, we're using the ENVIROSCAPE model to talk about some of these different landscapes that we have across our watershed. So just to orient you to some of the different things that we're going to be looking at today, we have some close-up pictures so that you can see some of these different land use areas a little bit more closely and a little bit in more detail here. So we do have a farm on our ENVIROSCAPE model. You'll see that we have kind of
We lost your
livestock, but can you hear me now?
Yep.
Okay, great. In addition to the farm, we also have roadways that are going to connect us to the other land use areas. So we have a water treatment plant that those roads are going to connect us with. We have neighborhoods where we have families that are living here. That neighborhood happens to be a golf course community. So you'll see right next to those houses, we have a golf course that is built right here on our ENVIROSCAPE model. And then we also have a portion of land where timber was harvested, so trees in this case, and that timber was used for perhaps different products like paper products and things like that. So you'll notice on this ENVIROSCAPE model, anytime you have these areas where there is brown here, that is suggesting that that's bare soil. The plants are no longer holding that soil in place. And so now we have a situation where you could potentially have soil erosion in this area. And then we also have a factory. So this is a factory that's manufacturing some kind of good, and you'll notice that they are situated right next to a tributary here that's going to, in this case, let's say drain into the Scioto River watershed. So what we're going to do with this ENVIROSCAPE model is, because it's a model, we use it to replicate things that can happen in real life. So we have some videos, and then we're going to go live in just a moment with this ENVIROSCAPE model to talk about how we use some of these different landscapes and the things that maybe we apply to them in order for them to be successful. So in the case of this farm that we have here, what you're going to see is that, especially in this area where the farmer is intending to plant some crops, in order for her to grow those crops, she has to plant seeds into the ground. Typically, she's planting those seeds into a healthy soil. So we planted those seeds down. We're going to add a little bit of soil to our landscape here. And because this is her livelihood and she wants to make sure that she has really healthy crops, let's say corn in this place, because in this case, because it's Ohio, she's going to add some different things potentially to that crop to make sure that it grows healthy. So fertilizers are something that she could add that's going to add some nutrients that her plants are going to use in order to grow big and strong. She also might add some pesticides. In this case, especially when we're talking about a farmer who is relying on that corn as a source of income, she wants to make sure that she doesn't have any insects or pests that could potentially consume that corn and give her less of a harvest. So pesticides could be applied. And then there also might be some herbicides that are applied in this case too, as a way to prevent weeds from growing amongst her crop as well. In addition to that, on the farm, she doesn't necessarily want the fertilizers and the pesticides and the herbicides to be in the place where her livestock is, but we do know that her livestock is also going to be producing something. So in this case, we are using chocolate sprinkles to represent the waste that those animals produce. Y'all are never going to look the same way again. And certainly this is something that she wants to make sure that she is keeping track of. You'll notice that we have our cows here and they do have access to one of the streams that eventually is going to flow right here into the Scioto River. And so she has to be mindful of that. Certainly our cows, when they have to go to the bathroom, they don't necessarily just stay up on land when that happens. So there's the potential for some of this manure to also make its way into the stream and into our watershed as well. In addition to that, here in our neighborhood, we also know that we apply different things potentially to our lawns so that we have healthy lawns that are growing, so that they grow nice and green, so that we don't have weeds. We also know, especially in the winter time, that we need to add things like salt to our roadways, especially on a snowy or an icy day, to make sure that those roadways are safe for travel. We might add some fertilizers so that our grass grows really strong and robust. It stays nice and green. And then just as we were talking about with the farm field as well, we might also add some pesticides and some herbicides to prevent insects from maybe destroying our lawns, or also to prevent weeds from growing on our lawns. So those are all some things that we could add there. In addition to that, there are things that we do with our cars. So hopefully we always make sure that if our cars are leaking oil or gasoline, that we get those fixed. Sometimes it happens and we don't realize it's happening, but typically we want to try to get those things fixed. We also, in the summertime, love probably to wash our cars and our driveways. So you're going to see we'll add some soap here and make sure that we can get lots of suds on our cars. And then some other things that we're adding in here. So you saw me add the chocolate sprinkles again. I would guess that several of you have animals at home that maybe you like to take on walks or let out in your backyard. And so animals like our pets, like our dogs, it's really important that we pick up after them. But the chocolate sprinkles in here represent that pet waste. And then the white specks that you saw that were added in here as well, those represent trash, which anytime that we have people in an area, there's probably going to be some trash that's produced. We like to think that nobody intentionally litters, but sometimes we have packaging that blows away from us when we're having a picnic outside or different things like that. So it's important to remember that whenever you have people, there's probably going to be some pollution, some trash pollution as well. And then over here, you'll also notice in our neighborhood that we do have a new house that's being built here. So again, just like we talked where soil is now exposed, we don't have plant roots that are holding that soil in place, and so we have some bare soil. We also have here our area where the timber was harvested, and again, that bare soil is represented here, and so we're going to add, in this case, this is cocoa powder that we use in our model to represent that bare soil that has the potential to erode off of our landscape in the event of a precipitation event. So Ron, that's a big thing that we have to think about when we're talking about the ENVIROSCAPE model, because anytime that we have precipitation that falls and it hits that particular watershed, it has the opportunity either to soak slowly into the ground or to run off of that landscape. And so when we're looking at our landscape here and all the different things that we have added across our landscape, whether it's fertilizers or pesticides or pollution, oil that's leaking from our cars, or even waste from our pets or manure from our livestock, that all has the potential to enter into our watershed when precipitation falls. So we are going to, we're going to ask you guys another poll question here. I'm going to skip through those slides real quick and we're going to go live here in just a second. Jordan is going to put up another poll question for us. We added all those different things to our landscape here. We want you to choose which one you think is going to be the major pollution problem when we're thinking about Ohio's rivers. So let's think in this case about the Scioto River that we have right here in our backyard. If you had to take a guess, go ahead and choose which one you think is going to be the major pollution challenge.
We've got about 3/4 of our audience answered so far. I'm going to give just another few seconds here to get those last ones in.
Great. All right, interesting. Okay, so trash pollution, good one. That's a great one that people predicted. Fertilizers, pet waste. All right, we have some that guessed soil, oil, gasoline. All right, great. Okay, you guys had some really, really interesting answers. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna go live on our ENVIROSCAPE model and we're gonna take a look and see if we can figure out what that is based on what we're seeing here. So give me just a moment. I'm gonna switch over to our iPad here. Okay, and everybody should be able to see that, hopefully live. So we are now live. One of the things I want to add on here, because I did promise you that we would see lots of suds on our cars here. So we're going to add a little bit of bubbles if we are washing our cars at home in our driveways here. And then just like we talked about, what we are going to do is we're going to take those predictions that you guys just made about what is going to be one of our biggest sources of pollution in our ENVIROSCAPE model and in our rivers here in Ohio. And we are going to make it rain across this landscape. So I'm going to start spraying some water and you guys are going to make observations at home to see what happens to that water as it starts to flow down off of this watershed model and start to collect right here in the Scioto River. So you're going to take a look at the color of the water that you see flowing down and see what else maybe ends up in the water and what you think could be these big sources of pollution.
You are welcome to type your observations into the chat box and we can kind of see what you're thinking and what you're observing as you go along.
And Linda and Jordan, I can't see the chat box from where I'm standing. So if you guys are receiving any comments and want to share those out, I would love to hear them too.
Doug sees lots of farm runoff. Lynn sees the water turning brown. Benjamin sees, it looks like it's polluted by the farm. Dennis sees
Great.
soil in the water. Just to make sure everyone knows how to use the chat, if you're on a desktop, you should be able to hover over your screen. In the bottom toolbar, you can open the chat window. If you're on a mobile device, you might have to click the screen and you'll find the icon there for your chat, and then you can switch back to the video after you have typed your answer. Let's see, Allison sees lots of farm runoff. Ethan sees that it's dirty.
Yeah, so these are all really great observations that you all are making, and spot on. Yeah, so when we start to think about pollution problems, especially when we're talking about our rivers and streams here in Ohio, it's pretty surprising, but one of our biggest pollution challenges is soil. So when that soil erodes off of a landscape because we no longer have plants that are holding the soil in place with their roots, now we have a big challenge where we're starting to see that soil that's eroding away. It's running off of our lands, actually entering into rivers and streams. And there's some big challenges with that. And you guys have probably all experienced that if you have looked at our rivers and streams, especially after a rainstorm. So if you have looked in the Scioto River or the Olentangy River that we have around here in central Ohio, you may have noticed that the color of that water kind of looks brown like chocolate milk. And that's a really good indication that we have had soil that has eroded off of the landscape, and it's now entered into our waterways that we have around here. When we think about that in real world terms and the impact that that can have for animals that are living in that particular habitat, if we're talking about fish that use their gills to breathe, if we're talking about that soil sediment being in the water, that could be a challenge for them to be able to breathe. And then we also have some really important animals that live at the very bottom of our rivers and streams. We call them macroinvertebrates. And even if you've never heard that term before, you're probably familiar with some macroinvertebrates. So if you've ever heard of like a leech before, that's one of the macroinvertebrates that we study when we're looking at water quality. If you've ever heard of a dragonfly before, you're probably most familiar with the ones that we see in their adult form when they're flying around, but they begin their life cycle in the water. And a lot of times these macroinvertebrates will stay at the very bottom of these river systems. They like to hold on to rocks, and they like to be in areas where that water can move very quickly between the rocks and that they need to survive. So when we talk about soil sediment entering into our rivers and streams, and potentially settling to the bottom of that river or stream, now we're talking about those macroinvertebrates potentially losing the habitat that they need to survive. And when we think about that in terms of other animals that could impact, those macroinvertebrates are a food source for a lot of our fish species that we have in our rivers and streams. Those small fish that eat the macroinvertebrates are then food for our larger fish, and our larger fish are food for really cool birds that we have around here, like bald eagles. We have great blue herons that'll feed on those larger fish. So when we talk about soil sediment entering into a river or stream, it really could have a big impact on not only the small animals that are living in that habitat, but also some of the larger animals that are living in that habitat as well. I think it's also really important to mention that we talked a lot about soil being one of the challenges that we have in our rivers and streams, but that's not to say that all those other things that we talked about on this ENVIROSCAPE model, the different things that we added like pesticides and fertilizers and herbicides, and certainly the trash, oil, and salt from our roadways, all of those things can enter into our rivers and streams too. And so it's really important for us when we're thinking about the community that we live in or our own backyard, it's really important for us to think about some of the things that we do in our own backyards or in our community and the impact that that could have on the water that's all around us. So I'm going to pause here for a second because I think that I see that there's some things that are coming in the chat box here. So I'll turn it over to Jordan or Linda if there's anything that we need to pull up, and I'm going to maybe leave this up for a second if there's anything we want to chat about, and then we'll flip through a couple more slides.
We did have a question from Allison. She said, after a major rain event with all the extra sediment running into the rivers and very swift currents, do you see an increase in deceased fish anywhere?
Do you want to answer that one, Linda?
I'll start and then you can maybe go as well. I would say with the rivers, a lot of that sediment does flow downstream. If it does, stay in a certain area, we could lose some of the smaller fish. And like Amy mentioned earlier, we could definitely lose the macroinvertebrates. In an area like a pond or lake where the water pretty much stays when it's in there, there may be more effect from it because it's more of a constant area. Do you have anything else you want to add to that, Amy?
I think that's great. That's a great question. Really good question.
I also want to mention, looking through the chat box and noticing a lot of the different things that people have said. The erosion, the soil washing off the land, like Amy said, is one of our major components. And you have to remember, as you look at the model, wherever you see the brown on the land, that's where soil can run off from. So erosion doesn't only happen in a couple of different areas, but anywhere where there's bare soil, we could have erosion. So, if you have like dirt roads, you can see the area where the trees have all been cut down. They're doing the construction site up there. All of these are different areas. If you have a bare spot in your backyard, if you walk over the same area all the time and you loosen up the soil, any of those places are erosion potential. The other thing I want to mention is that fertilizers, again, is something that's very high in one of our pollution problems. Farmers use fertilizer, but so do landowners, so do golf courses. There's a lot of different places where these can come from. So it's not just one location that's the issue. Like Amy said, we all have to think about what we do in our own backyards and the things that we use, and being really careful when you do put fertilizers out or pesticides. If you use any of those chemicals, be really careful about when you use them and how much you use and things like that.
Yeah, those are all really, really great points. One more thing I want to show everybody before we switch away from the model and just go over some ideas for solutions to wrap up our presentation. So as you're looking at our model here and kind of the bird's eye view of our landscape, you'll notice, just as Linda was saying, that we all kind of have a responsibility to think about how we are using our spaces and what we're applying to the spaces within our community. And I think that all of the things that we showed just now are a really great example of something that we call non-point source pollution. So basically what non-point source pollution is it means that it's really hard to say, for example, just how much fertilizer came off of the Smith's yard in this case, or how much came off of this yard in this case, or how much fertilizer actually did come off of this farm field. So non-point source pollution means that we're all kind of contributing to this, and it's really hard to pinpoint exactly what the source of pollution was. On the flip side, there's also something called point source pollution. I'm going to stand up again for just a moment here and walk over to the model here. You'll notice over in this corner of our model, a little bit earlier on, we were talking about factories. And we were talking about how this particular manufacturing company happens to be right on a tributary that does eventually make its way into the Scioto River watershed. So I want to show you guys an example, a really good visual example of point source pollution, where we can directly say, when there is a source of pollution, we can say, oh my goodness, look, that is the exact source where that pollution came from. So hopefully everybody can see up in the corner right here. I'm going to squeeze a little bit down. And hopefully you all were just able to observe how this particular factory happened to take the waste from whatever they were manufacturing, and they put it directly in to our watershed here, and it flowed directly into the Scioto River in this case. Okay, so that's a really good example of point source pollution, because we could say and see, okay, the pollution came from this factory, and we watched as they put it out into the environment and travel down this tributary and into the river here. Let's see, I'm gonna stop sharing this for just 1 second and go back to our PowerPoint here. Because what we want to mention with point source and non-point source pollution, today our biggest challenges when we're talking about watersheds and pollution in our watersheds really is non-point source pollution, all those things that we just kind of mentioned. But it wasn't so long ago that point source pollution happened to be one of our biggest environmental challenges. So if you look at the photograph that we have in the bottom of our screen here, this is unfortunately one of the fires. There were many fires that happened on the Cuyahoga River up in Cleveland here, where we think that there was so much pollution in the form of oil that happened to be in the river, that in this case, one of the fires that had the most attention drawn to it, we think that there was a train that was traveling over and it happened to throw a spark off of the track. That spark landed on oil that was down in the river, and that oil caught on fire, and so the river was on fire. Because of events like this, there were laws that were put into place, and there are organizations like the Environmental Protection Agency who do a really, really great job of making sure that this point source pollution is no longer happening, so that our rivers and streams are safe for us to swim in, for us to go boating on, for us to go fishing in, and for all of those animals that are making that their habitat. So it's really important to remember that point source pollution has been a challenge historically. It's something that is really well monitored today here in the United States. And so we have a really big responsibility, just as Linda was saying, to make sure that we're doing our part to kind of reduce these non-point sources of pollution, like things that we do to our backyards and in our community here. I'm going to go back to one more slide here too before we talk about solutions. So has everybody seen these in their neighborhood or their community? We actually have two different things up here on the screen. So over on our left-hand side over here, we have something called a sanitary sewer. And then over on the right-hand side here, they look different. So they all look a little bit different, but they are serving the same purpose. We call these storm drains. So the reason we want to bring this up is this is one of our big messages here at Franklin Soil and Water Conservation District, because these two things operate in two different ways. So the sanitary sewer is connected in most cases to our houses. And so when we get our water that comes into our house, whether we're getting it to get a drink of water, whether we're going to the bathroom, whether we're taking a bath, the water that then leaves our house is part of the sanitary sewer, where it goes to a water treatment plant and it's cleaned and it gets repurposed into water that will come back into our house. On the flip side, these storm drains that we have over here on the right-hand side, a lot of people don't know this. I didn't really understand this when I first started working at Franklin Soil and Water Conservation District. But the water that goes into these storm drains doesn't go through a filtration process. It actually goes directly into our rivers and streams. So when you're walking along your neighborhood and you happen to see a storm drain that's littered with leaves and debris and maybe even some trash, what's important to know is whatever is in that storm drain has the potential to go down underground into our pipe system here, but eventually empty out into our local rivers and streams, like the Scioto River, which is the watershed that we've been talking about here today. So we have a really important job when we're thinking about these storm drains, and something that we like to say is only rain down the drain. They serve a really important job. In a rainstorm, they're going to free the roadways of that excessive amounts of water so that cars can safely travel down the roads. But it also means that if there's anything in the road, or if we dump anything off of our driveways, or if we apply anything onto our yards, there's the potential when it rains for that runoff to travel down into the street, into these storm drains, and into our rivers and streams. So just something that's really important to know the difference between, and also recognize that we can make a difference by keeping trash, pollution, leaf litter, and things like that out of our storm drains as well. So some solutions. We want to end on a happy note and know that there are lots of things that we can do in our own backyards and communities to really make a difference for the quality of our water here in our local watersheds. So one of the things that we talked about is our big pollution problem was soil, and soil being eroded off of our landscape and into our waters. So there's some really easy solutions to this. Just as Linda was saying, any area of land that you have where soil is exposed, there is potential for soil to erode off of that land. So if you are finding yourself in a situation, maybe in your own backyard or in your community, where you are seeing areas where there is bare exposed soil, plant. So grass is a good option, but there's an even better option out there, which are native plants. So grass does a good job because we can see that they have root systems that do go into the ground and can cover up that soil and hold that soil in place. But if we compare the roots of our grass here to some of the roots of our native plants, we might notice that our native plants that we have around here have really extensive root systems that go pretty far down into the ground and do a really good job of spreading out. Native plants are also a really great option because they don't require a lot of excess watering, especially in the summertime. They're adapted to live in this particular area. And a lot of times our native plants are actually a source of food or some other basic for a lot of our wildlife that we have here in Ohio. So a great example is milkweed. Milkweed is a native plant that actually is a host plant for the monarch butterfly. So monarchs will lay their eggs on those plants. The caterpillars can feed on that particular plant and complete their life cycle. So native plants serve a really good purpose for holding soil in place and then also providing basic needs for a lot of our wildlife that we have here. Other things that we like to mention is if you are going to grow grass, let it go a little bit higher. And then also in the fall time, when these leaves fall down on the ground, we do a lot of raking of those leaves, and that's okay. Sometimes our trees in our backyard produce too many leaves that are for our lawns. But another way to think about maybe taking care of our grass and not having to fertilize it is to think about these leaves as a natural fertilizer. So in the fall time, when these leaves fall, rather than raking up all of those leaves, we can use our lawnmowers and actually chop those leaves down into smaller pieces. Let those leaves lay across our grass, and if they're small enough, they'll just kind of trickle through the blades of grass and land on our soil. And you're actually boosting nutrients into your soil there and giving them the nutrients giving that soil and the grass the nutrients that it needs to survive. And then certainly we also talked about how pet waste can be a challenge. Pet waste can have bacteria in it that we don't necessarily want in our waterways. And so at Franklin Soil and Water Conservation District, we also have a program where we encourage pet owners to pick up after their dogs when they're walking their dogs. And so it's a program that we support and something that we hope you could participate in too. Linda, is there anything else you want to add in terms of solutions up here?
Yeah, and I also have a question that I need to answer as well. Jacob asked, wouldn't the water put it out? He was talking about the fire on the Cuyahoga River. And my answer to that would be, you would think so, but oil and gas don't mix with water. So what happened was all the oils and gases that were in the river, basically, I always say, think about it being like saran wrap on a bowl or plastic wrap on a bowl. So it kind of covered the top of the river. And so that oil is what was on fire, and that was on top of the river. The water really didn't get to it because it was underneath. And so they actually did, in some cases, have to bring fire trucks or fire boats to actually put the water out, which is kind of crazy. I understand. Other solutions. We talked about so many different places that Amy mentioned that we had different pollution problems. One that I like to mention is the washing the car in the driveway. That's a very common place to wash your car, but generally there are the storm drains right there. And so we have to think about that. And like we mentioned, only rain goes down the drain. If you could actually wash your car on the grass, you'd be watering the lawn at the same time you're washing your car. So all the water will soak down into the ground. The soap will filter through the soils and things and should be fine. I'm sorry, the soap should soak through the soils and be fine. Obviously only do that when it's not super wet out. You don't want to get your car stuck in the mud in your lawn. I understand that. And only if you have access, obviously, but that is another solution. Also take it to a car wash. I always say it's like going on a field trip. If you can take the car to the car wash, then all of that soapy water goes down the drains of the car wash. Car washes are connected, must be connected to the sewer system so that Sanitary sewer that Amy talked about, that water does get treated and cleaned at our wastewater treatment plants. So any water that leaves a car wash will get treated and cleaned. A lot of times car washes are really good about actually recycling, cleaning, recycling, reusing the water on site. And so again, that's saving water there also. So that's another one that I can think of. I mentioned earlier, just be careful when you're using fertilizers or any lawn chemicals. Be careful that it's not going to rain right away, and watch the label. More is not always better.
I'll go ahead and open it up then for more questions. So again, our audience, if you do have a question, go ahead and open your chat and go ahead and type it to us.
Also, if they have any other solutions they would like to propose to us, that would be great as well. So if you have an idea that we didn't mention of a way that we can protect our lawns or protect our neighborhoods, that'd be great as well.
I'll mention one other thing while people potentially are typing some things in here. At Franklin Soil and Water Conservation District, we also have a community backyards program for folks that are living in Franklin County. So if you are interested in maybe installing some native plants in your own backyard, check out our website to learn a little bit more about that rebate program and to see if you qualify for that. Lynn had a great question about what are some common native plants that we have around here. So around here that specialize in native plants. I'm going to throw out one of our partners that we work with a lot is Scioto Gardens. They're located in Delaware, Ohio, and they have a huge list of different native plants that, depending on what you're looking for, whether you're looking for more of an herbaceous plant or whether you're looking for a tree species, whether you're looking for something that flowers or something that's a little bit more shrubby, they have all kinds of different plants that you can talk with them about, especially when you're thinking about potentially where you might want to be planting them, full sun, part sun, shade, things like that. That would be a great resource for you to reach out to. Again, their name is Scioto Gardens. There's also a website called the Ladybird Johnson website, and that is more of a national website, but you can go to there and type in information about where your location is that you are looking for specific native plants, and they will then kind of take that search and condense it down to give you suggestions for great plants to put in your backyard. Linda, did you want to add anything else about native plants? I'm trying to monitor the chat and I saw that one jump up there about native plants.
Yeah, I do also want to add that we do have a great working relationship with many of the local nurseries, and we actually do label the plants as native plants. So as you're looking through the plants at a nursery, oftentimes you will see one that has, or see some that have labels on them that say native plants. And so you can ask at the local nurseries. A lot of them do have our list there of native plants. And like I said, we try to label them as well, so you know when you get there. So that's a really good question. But yeah, natives are a great way to go. Also noticed that somebody mentioned rain barrels. That's a great thing. And rain barrels are also a part of our backyard conservation program that you can get rebates for. But that is a great way to save water. You can use the rain, which again, we have plenty of in Ohio normally, and you can water your plants with that. So that's a great idea also.
I see we have a question from Lauren. She was wondering about pet-friendly lawn chemicals or organic lawn chemicals. Is there any difference to those? Would those be safer for our environment?
Linda, do you want to answer that one?
That's a great question. I don't know an awful lot about the lawn chemicals themselves, but my guess is obviously if they're pet friendly, it's a little bit better. I always cringe whenever I see the word chemical as far as our environment. But yeah, lawn treatments that are more organic or more natural are obviously going to be better than those that are not. I'm always going to say that it's kind of nice to let your lawn go and not use any if possible, but definitely go more towards the organic or the pet friendly are going to be safer for all the environment than some of the other ones that you could purchase.
We have a question from Max. He was wondering about, in terms of soil runoff, if maybe concrete barriers, would that help stop water runoff? For example, putting it around a field in a farm, on a farm.
A great question. When we talk about walls, and I saw a couple of different people mention walls, I always say a living wall is better. So we promote growing plants. We promote filter strips and areas called riparian zones. That's the area right around a river. You can have more trees planted there. Farmers should obviously not plow all the way to the river like the one in our model did. Most farmers are not going to do that because they know that they want to leave that space for the runoff to filter through the plants. So a living wall is going to be better because those roots are going to soak that water in and use that water. And then plants are fantastic filters, like Amy mentioned earlier, and the plants will filter the materials that come through. The other thing I will say is, especially on construction sites, again, a type of wall, but a silt fence. It's a plastic barrier that you would see, looks kind of like a thick plastic bag, but it's mesh material, so the water can get through it, but the soil and other things cannot. So whenever you're driving around a construction site, you should see this fence. It's usually about 4 feet tall. It's buried in the ground, and it's either a black or an orange now. I think they use plastic fence. That's going to be a great protection between the construction site. It's going to catch that soil and keep it up on the construction site where we need it to be and keep it out of our rivers where we don't want it to be.
I saw another question from Allison. She was wondering if you have any suggestions for keeping insects from breeding in your standing water in a rain barrel.
That's a great question also. In some places or some cases, you can buy what they call mosquito dunk. It's something that you can put in your rain barrel to prevent that from happening. If you can have obviously a lid over your rain barrel, that's the best. And then just like a mesh area for the water to get through, that's going to help protect somewhat as well. So there are some different options that can help with that.
That appears to be all the time we have for today. Do you have any final thoughts before we conclude the program?
We want to thank everyone for joining.
Oh, sorry, Linda.
Go ahead, Amy.
Oh, I was just looking through the comments and seeing everybody that's saying they have rain barrels and compost bins, and we just want to say thank you so much. That's so exciting to hear that, and that makes our hearts really happy, and we appreciate all y'all are doing to protect our soil and water resources around here.
Thank you so much. If you have any questions, you can always go to our website and check out things there. Amy's and my email addresses are on the website as well if you have specific questions, but please take a look. And again, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Amy and Linda, for presenting the program for us today. I know I definitely learned a lot. I'm excited to visit your website. We're trying to grow a garden in our backyard, and we need to figure out how to make a rain barrel. So it's really interesting to figure out how all of the different water in our watershed works. So thank you very much. I encourage all of our guests to attend our other events. The next one that I want to highlight for us all is a science trivia night that is happening tonight at 7 p.m. You can start by joining anywhere after 6:30. If you go to the COSI Science Festival website, you'll see excess trivia, and there are instructions for joining that trivia night. So we hope to see you there, and again throughout the rest of the week for all of our other Science Festival events. Thank you very much, and have a great day, everyone.